Invincible by Robert Kirkman is one of the few comics that has had an actual ending, and was so popular that it was made into an Amazon Prime TV show. But how does the comic differ from the show? Today, you'll find out with volumes 1 and 2. Benny recorded these earlier this year as members-only videos, but now I'm combining them as a full story for everyone to enjoy. So here you have it, Invincible Volume 1 and 2.
The mountains sped past below as Invincible flies as fast as he can, the man held tightly in his arms. "You know, you really ruined my afternoon," Invincible tells the man, finally far enough away from everything. He tosses the man just as he explodes, thrown it clear. Invincible then lands in a pile of snow, and he picks himself up, dusting off the snow and looking around. "If I keep this up, I'm gonna give myself a heart attack," he says with a smile as he leaps into the air to fly home. 4 months ago, Mark Grayson's mom, Deborah, pounds on the bathroom door. "If you keep that up, you're gonna give yourself a heart attack," she warns him loudly. "Jesus, Mom, I'm just reading a comic book. I'll be out in a minute," he yells back as she walks away, telling him that he'll be late for school. Mark finally makes his way down to the kitchen, noting that he has 10 minutes to spare. "Where's Dad at? Did he come home last night?" he asks, getting his breakfast. But his mother says no, that he's been very busy at work lately. So Mark flips the TV on and a news reporter tells the world that Omni-Man has been fighting a dragon in Taiwan for the last 10 hours, stopping it from enslaving the people. "Well, now I know where he is," Mark tells her, and his mother looks up at the television. "I hope he brings back something nice for me." "I've never been to Taiwan," she comments. Later, Mark is walking out to school when his friend William catches up, inviting him out with the rest of the friends. But Mark can't go. He's got to work at the Burger Mart tonight. A little bit more time passes and he walks outside, his soul-crushing job to toss away the garbage, and he flings it into the air, and it keeps going and going and going. The trash disappears into the atmosphere. A small smile creeps on his face as he realizes what has happened. "It's about time," he whispers. That night, he and Deborah sit down for dinner, knowing his father's going to be late. "I had an interesting day today," Mark begins, but with a gust of air, his father is there, telling them that he had to deal with a flood in Egypt. He tells them that he dealt with the dragon. "And once I found out who was controlling the thing, there wasn't much to it," Nolan tells them. Deborah smiles, looking at her son, asking if anything interesting happened to him. "Yeah, I think I'm finally getting my superpowers," Mark tells them, and Deborah smiles. "That's nice. Can someone pass the potatoes?" she asks. That night, Mark stands out on the roof of their porch, talking to himself. His father told him that flying is a reflex, and it should kick in when he jumps. Even if he can't fly, as long as he is invulnerable, he should be fine. But if I can't fly yet, then it's possible that I'm not invulnerable yet? "Oh, the heck with it," he finally says, leaping, closing his eyes. And he opens them to find himself hovering over the earth. "Too cool!" he yells, rocketing into the air. A little more time passes, and a gang of thieves are running from the police. They yell at their rocky friend for following them, telling him that he was supposed to deal with the cops. "Just because bullets bounce off of me doesn't mean that they feel like rubber. There were 6 cops back there ready to open fire," he yells at them. He picks up his buddies, leaping over a fence, but they're smacked out of the air by Mark, dressed in probably the worst superhero costume ever. "Are you trying to rob us or stop us?" the Rockman says, leaping to fight the hero. Mark knocks him away with a single punch. "Sorry about that. I guess the outfit can be misleading." "I'm sure my intentions are clear now," Mark tells the unconscious man. "What in God's name are you wearing?" Nolan asks, standing in a nearby alleyway. He asks Mark if it's a little early for him to be fighting crime since he's only had his powers for about a week. Mark smiles, pulling down his mask, explaining that he was just practicing flying when he saw the robbers. "Could've just let him get away," he tells his dad. Nolan nods, telling his boy to follow him. "I'm going to introduce you to a guy who can help you out." So a short time later, the two are standing at the tailor's shop, with Mark wearing a new supersuit. "Prom dresses by day, nuclear-powered battle armor by night, with the occasional spandex number thrown in every now and then," the tailor tells Mark. Nolan tells Mark that the tailor was the first one to create his costume. Nolan suddenly has to leave, though, called away by a crisis. So Mark continues to talk to the tailor, explaining that while he likes the suit, he doesn't think it's right for him. "Not iconic enough," Mark explains, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The tailor nods, telling the young hero to come up with a few names, so that they can tailor the suit to his name. So the next day, Mark is leaving class, with the teacher asking one of the students to stay behind. By his locker, Mark overhears a bully messing with one of the students, so he turns, telling the large kid to lay off. "What's the matter? You feeling left out or something? Well, I'm sure I can make you feel included," the bully tells Mark, shoving him. But Mark just slams the boy into the locker, denting the metal, letting the boy slide down. It's only a few moments later that he's sitting in the principal's office, with the man telling him that he needs to not let this kind of thing get to him. He needs to be worrying about college. The principal informs Mark that it isn't his job to protect the other kids. "You're not invincible, you know," the principal tells him, bringing a smile to Mark's face. So the next day, the bank robbers rush out onto the street. They run through traffic, ducking down a side alleyway where their van should be waiting. But they suddenly stop short as they see the van lifted over the head of a young hero. "Drop it, freak, or I'll blow your head away!" one of them shouts, drawing a pistol. Mark looks at them. "I wouldn't do that. I'm invincible," he warns them. A little time passes, now that Mark has his superhero name. Nolan, Omni-Man, leans forward. "Okay, son, I think you're old enough for me to tell you where I come from." Omni-Man begins. He explains that he comes from the planet known as Viltrum. The Viltrumite were very human-like, except that they had the ability to fly, move at super speed, and possessed super strength. The Viltrumite had obtained the perfect society, and so they decided to bring that perfection to the rest of the galaxy. The World Betterment Committee was formed, and they began to search the stars. They discovered worlds that were at crucial stages of development. They would install global defense satellites, and the scientists would assist in the development of the society's technology. Nolan joined the committee when he was old enough and was the first to discover the planet of Earth. He had grown fond of the world through his observations and placed it under the committee's notice. But it was decided that Earth was too crude and not developed enough for the committee's betterment. So Nolan offered a solution. He would live amongst the Earthlings, protecting them, nurturing them until they were ready for Viltrum's aid. The committee agreed, although they warned Nolan that due to Earth's remote location, there might not be a chance of returning. Nolan went anyway. He discovered that Earth was a nest of individuality. He also quickly learned that the Earthlings were in constant danger, protecting them from the monsters, aliens, and everyday accidents. One day he lifted a car and stopped to see a beautiful woman. "It was less than a year before I'd met your mother, but that's a story for another time." Nolan leans back, looking down at his young son playing with his toys, and he explains that he's telling them all of this for a reason. "Things are going to change for you in a few years when you hit puberty. You're going to start to get acne, your voice will start to crack and eventually change. And you'll begin to grow hair in strange places. You're going to start looking at girls in a whole new light. There's a good chance you're going to start to develop superpowers. Mark, do you understand?" Nolan tells him and finally asks. Young Mark looks at his father for a moment, action figure still in hand. "Wow, am I going to be able to fly?" he finally asks. It's years later that teenage Mark Grayson is sitting in his bed, unable to sleep. "Yeah, I can fly," he whispers, finally getting up, flying out the window, wearing only his sweatpants. He flies over the city and sees a strange blue man stealing game boxes. He launches himself at the villain, only to be knocked away by one hard punch. "Aren't you past your bedtime, young man?" the crook asks, mocking him. "Actually, yeah," Mark agrees, launching himself at the villain again. This time an explosion sparks between them and the two are launched away. They both look up to see a group of costumed heroes on a hoverbike. "That was a BB. You don't want to see what I could do with a golf ball. Now, who started it?" Rex Splode asks, his hand already ignited with another explosive object. But the blue villain reaches out, taking their hoverbike and knocking the heroes aside. "Way to go, Rex. We had the element of surprise," Robot tells his overzealous teammate. "Sorry, seemed like a good idea at the time," Rex tells their leader as he helps Duplicate to her feet. The blue man then rushes the team, but Mark is there, knocking him out with one punch. "Wow, never mind. Nice job, kid." Robot nods, looking down at the villain. The group begins to pull the crook away as Robot calls in another hoverbike. One of the heroes, a red-headed girl, walks up to Mark. "Nice costume," she tells him, looking at his sweatpants. "Sorry, there wasn't a phone booth around here?" Mark tells her, looking at the girl for a moment. "Do I know you?" he asks, and Adam Eve looks at him too. "You do look familiar," she agrees. Robot comes over, introducing the team to Mark. And finally, they all leave on a second hoverbike, taking the man with them. It's the next day that Mark comes up behind Eve at school. "I knew it!" he exclaims, and she turns, smiling. "Hey, it's you. We've been in physics together all this time," she comments. They walk down the halls, with Eve catching Mark up on what it's like to be a teenage superhero. They eventually walk out of the school, with Eve inviting Mark to the teen team's secret lair to follow up on the incident from last night. Mark agrees, and Eve leads him out to the dumpsters outside of their school. "Nice place," Mark remarks, holding his nose to the smell. Do you know of any other secluded areas around here? She asks, but Mark changes quickly, with Eve using her powers to convert her clothes into her costume. So how do we get out of here without being spotted? Mark asks, though now he's in his invincible costume. Adam Eve leads the way and they both leap into the sky. You'd be surprised how rarely people ever look up, she tells him, and they both arrive at the teen team's secret lair within the city bridge. Robot greets Invincible, assuming that he is the hero from last night. He tells them that he erased the villain known as Mauler's memory and allowed him to leave, assuming that he would lead them back to his base. Rex and Kate are on the mission. If you had gotten here 3 minutes later, I would have had to go myself. He tells them. The three teens take the hoverbike, quickly giving chase. Mauler stands on a street corner, dazed and confused. He finally goes into the secret lair, greeted by another man who looks exactly like him. Where have you been? We need those processors. I'm not going to have enough to power the robots without the new shipment, the second Mauler explains. The first one nods, telling him that he can't remember anything from last night, so he just came back. The two Maulers then go into the next room, looking at their army of robots. I don't think the plan can wait, the second Mauler explains, when suddenly the roof explodes as the three teenage superheroes launch themselves in. I think we've heard enough, Robot exclaims, and one Mauler goes for Eve, but Invincible takes him out with a single punch. Robot manages to shock the other, dropping him quickly as Invincible helps Eve to her feet. Robot then turns to him. Thanks for the help, Invincible. You seem like a pretty useful guy. Think you might be interested in staying with us? He asks, and Mark smiles. I'll think about it. Is it always this easy? Meanwhile, at the mall across town, a teenage boy wakes up on one of the mall benches. He opens his shirt to reveal the strange robotic vest that he seems to be wearing. The timer on the vest reaches 0, and the explosion rips apart the mall, killing everyone. Mark Grayson sits on the floor of his bedroom working on his physics homework, but the phone buzzes, and Mark answers to the sound of his father's voice. Pay attention, son. I need your help, Omni-Man says. Mark is immediately on his feet, moving to his closet to get his invincible costume. I'm on an important mission with the Guardians of the Globe. I just got an alert of a major baddie coming into our solar system and heading straight for Earth. I fought this guy before. He's not out of your league, but he's going to be the toughest guy you have faced so far. Omni-Man explains, telling his son that he needs to head up into space to make sure the guy doesn't make it to Earth. All right, Dad. I got it, Mark says, pulling on his costume. But he pauses. Wait, how am I supposed to fight a guy in orbit? How am I going to breathe? Mark asks in fear, but Omni-Man explains that he can hold his breath for 2 weeks. Mark should be okay for an hour. Oh, one more thing. See if your mom can make steaks tonight. If everything works out here, I'm going to want to celebrate. Mark finishes pulling on his costume, heading for the window. Mom! Dad wants steaks tonight! Mark shouts back into the house before leaping out into the sky. As he reaches the edge of Earth's atmosphere, he takes in a deep breath, flying into the vastness of space away from Earth. And he stops, looking around. Now what? He wonders to himself, but something slams into him from behind, knocking him away. You're early! The alien says in his mind, the warrior staring at him for a moment. Oh wait, you're into too! The alien thinks, and Mark doesn't respond, flying back at him, slamming into him hard. Not bad, but if you're gonna slam me into something, your moon is the closest option, and it's that way! The alien thinks with a smirk as he points, Invincible spinning away. Why can I hear you in my head? He thinks, and the alien smiles, flying forward, punching Mark several times. If you know a better way of subspace communication, I'd love to hear it. This always gives me a massive headache, he thinks, and Invincible blocks another blow, punching the alien hard, sending him away. Do you think this is a game? Mark thinks, and the alien flies back at him, hitting him hard. Absolutely not, he thinks, pointing out that Invincible's predecessor never talked this much. Of course, I don't think I've ever fought him this long, he points out before hitting Mark with a blow that sends him spinning back towards Earth again. Mark breaks through the atmosphere, gasping for air. Oh, I needed that, he says to himself before taking in a deep breath, heading back up into space, slamming into the alien again, this time slamming him hard into the moon. They both get to their feet quickly, and the alien punches him again, sending him skipping across the surface of the moon. I'm gonna start to think you're not a suitable replacement, the alien remarks, and Mark looks up. Stop fighting me! Can we just talk about this? Mark thinks, and the alien pauses. Well, you are entitled to one break. Okay, let's start with that. How am I entitled to anything? Mark asks, and the pair sit down. The alien explaining that he is a champion evaluation officer who goes to the worlds as a part of a coalition of the planets and makes sure that their champions are up to the task of defending their worlds. Why would we sign up for that? Most people on my planet don't even acknowledge the existence of aliens, Mark points out. The alien holds up his datapad, pointing out that Urath has been on his route for the last 15 years. Urath? This is Earth! Mark mentally shouts, and the alien looks at his datapad. Oh, crap. He jumps to his feet, scared of his upcoming evaluation for the next 15 years. Sorry to break the news to you, man. Invincible thinks, but they shake hands, and the alien thanks him before leaping and flying back into space. See you around, Invincible! He thinks over his shoulder and waves back, and Mark pauses for a moment before turning back to Earth. Whoa, he thinks to himself as he stares down at the blue world that is his home. A short time later, he lands back and he joins his parents for dinner. How'd it go? Omni-Man asks as they all sit down for the steak dinner. Actually, not that bad, Mark says, explaining that he merely talked to the alien and learned that he was on the wrong planet. Omni-Man pauses. Damn, son, I'm impressed. I wish you'd been around the first time I fought him, he admits. Mark takes a couple of bites of his meal before getting to his feet, telling his parents that he's exhausted and he's just gonna head to bed. Once they're alone, Deborah looks at Nolan with a smirk. Sounds to me like someone sitting at this table should start using his brains a little more than his brawn. And Nolan takes a sip of his water. Beginner's luck. Meanwhile, upstairs, Mark prepares to fall into his bed, but stops when he looks down at his leftover homework, groaning, laying out on the floor, continuing the work that he needs to do tomorrow. The next day, Mark and Nolan fly high up in the air, throwing a baseball around the planet in a superhero game of catch, while Nolan tells Mark everything that happened to him while he was abducted into another dimension. He explains that he doesn't know how long he was gone, since time works differently there. I always round down. I think it makes your mother feel better, Nolan says as he tosses the ball again. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about, Nolan says, explaining to Mark that the people heard him call Omni-Man Dad when he was taken. Geez, I never even realized. Is that bad? Mark asks as he catches the ball. Nolan shrugs, explaining that some of his villains might come after Invincible if they believe that he's Omni-Man's son. With their discussion done, they fly back down to the house, where Mark quickly changes into his civilian clothes. Today is the day that he and William are going to check out Upstate University before they start college in the fall. After the two boys leave, Nolan looks at his wife with mischief in his eyes. Alone at last, he says with a smirk before picking her up and flying at super speed out of their bedroom. Elsewhere in the city, Robot has brought the teen team together in their secret base over at the bridge. He informs them all that he has been asked to try out for the Guardians of the Globe. His friends are happy for him, but he also informs them that he'll be disbanding the teen team. I could not have two teams at once and remain effective. Besides, the name would become inaccurate in a couple of years anyway. He tells them, adding that they can use the secret base anytime that they want. The rest of the team are happy for their friend and they celebrate. Elsewhere in the home of Black Samson, Sanford, Samson's trusted butler, brings him a telephone. He's on hold, sir, Sanford says, and Samson thanks him, answering the call from the tailor. But Art gives him bad news, explaining that his new suit still needs to be field tested before it's ready. You don't understand what I'm going through here. I'm nothing without my powers. Do you realize the Guardians of the Globe have revoked my membership? I'm completely useless, Samson says, pleading with Art to hurry up before finally hanging up and handing the phone back to Sanford. Saddened, Samson sits alone in the dark of his mansion. Meanwhile, Mark and William have arrived at the college and they get the grand tour, taking up most of the afternoon. Eventually, the day winds down and they find themselves on the quad. So, what do you think? William asks as they walk. Mark shrugs, explaining that he was planning on going here anyway, as it fits into his family's budget, and William nods. Yeah, I more or less just wanted to get an authorized day off of school, he says, and the two sit down, happy that they're going to be roommates in the fall. Suddenly, the ground quakes beneath them. Do you hear that? The wall explodes behind them as a cyborg creature bursts through, tossing the pair and their bench away. William, take cover! Mark shouts as he dashes away. William looks up in surprise as Invincible suddenly appears. Everyone, get out of the way! The hero shouts as he rushes at the cyborg, but the creature doesn't even look at him as he backhands him away. People struggle to get out of the monster's path, forcing Invincible to constantly rush in and rescue them instead of fighting the cyborg as it stomps across the quad. Jeez, people, can you at least try to be careful? Invincible says as he pulls another young woman to safety after she trips. Before Invincible can engage with the cyborg again, it leaps into the air, impaling itself on the fountain and explodes. Everyone, including Invincible, stares in surprise. After the police and the EMTs arrive, Invincible flies away. Moments later, Mark rushes back to his friend. Oh, William, thank God you're safe. I had to go and try and find help. William stares at him for a moment before raising an eyebrow. Yeah, dude, why didn't you just tell me you had superpowers? That night, William drops Mark back off at his house and the two promise to talk about what happened tomorrow. Your secret's safe with me, pal. William shouts out the window, causing Mark to roll his eyes. In their bedroom, Nolan looks up at the sound of the car door outside, and in a blur of motion, Nolan and Deborah are sitting on the couch. Mark walks inside, finding his parents trying to act innocent about what they've been up to all day. Mark just stares at him in shock for the moment before turning to the stairs. Holy crap, I'm not prepared to deal with this tonight. I'll be upstairs until I move out, he says, and Deborah looks down, realizing that her shirt is inside out and backwards, and elbows her husband. Sorry, I was in a hurry, Nolan says with a smile, shrugging. But Mark doesn't have time. He goes upstairs and rests as the phone suddenly rings. Hello? Nolan says as he answers. In a short amount of time, Omni-Man and Invincible are at Art's tailor shop. The tailor to the superheroes informs him that someone broke into his shop and they only stole one thing. I didn't see who it was. They knocked me out before I even knew they had broken in. I was developing a suit that would restore Black Samson's powers. You're not saying, Omni-Man begins to ask, but Art shrugs, unsure of who actually took the suit. All I know for sure is that someone who is crazy enough to break in here and rob me is roaming free out there in a suit that gives them the power to level cities, and it's all my fault. Elsewhere in the city, Adam Eve arrives at the former hideout of Teen Team. Hello? Is anyone here? She calls out into the darkness, and as she rounds the corner into the training room, she sees something that shocks her, sinking to the ground in tears. After a long week of superheroing, Mark has decided to sleep in a little. So as to not bother him, we now turn our attention to the heroes of the world and introduce the Guardians of the Globe. In Midnight City, two robbers are breaking into a former bank. One is worried about the police arriving, but his older brother explains that there are very few cops in the city since the Midnight Magician succeeded in plunging the city into an endless night. Our only real threat is Darkwing, and he can't be everywhere, the robber jokes. I wouldn't be so sure. Darkwing hisses as he leaps out of the shadows, the robbers trying to flee, but a dark bolo and a few well-placed punches take them out quickly. As Darkwing is securing them, the radio on his utility belt begins to beep. Guardians of the Globe priority alert, return to the base immediately, it says. Darkwing leaps off of the building into his waiting jet, placing a call to his butler to alert the authorities to the robbers' locations. Back over in Moscow, a red blur passes through the country, saving people from robbers, stopping the supervillain known as Curse, and saving a little girl's kitten from a tree. While the hero known as Red Rush returns to his waiting wife, she yells at him because he forgot to change back out of his costume in the middle of her story. But the romantic lunch is cut short by the priority alert. He kisses her goodbye before disappearing. Over in Boston, War Woman awakens in her date's bed, heading out into the kitchen to find the woman making her breakfast. But their morning is ruined as a warrior explodes through the wall, ordering the hero to return to her home realm at the Queen's command. But War Woman activates her magic amulet and appears in her superhero garb. I go where I please, she bellows as she smashes the warrior with her magic mace. The battle nearly destroyed the apartment, and as the smoke clears, War Woman turns to her lover and apologizes for the damages, promising to buy her a new apartment and replace everything. Pick a larger place, I plan to stay over more often, she tells her. But the priority alert beeps and she's forced to go, leaving the large hole in the apartment wall. Beneath the waves of the ocean, Aquarius sits on the throne of Atlantis, his eyes closed in slumber. The priority beeps and awakens him. He leaps into action, heading towards the surface. Finally, some action, he shouts. And out in space, both Martian Man and Green Ghost are fighting against an extraterrestrial organism. The rookie Green Ghost manages to phase through the robot's brain and fry its circuitry. The two heroes then return to Earth and are alerted to a priority message and quickly fly towards Guardian's base. High above Denver, the Golden Age villain known as Biplane is gloating to the Immortal that he is planning on blowing himself up and has enough radioactive material to make Denver a nightlight. I thought I was rid of all of you ridiculous villains. Immortal sighs. Biplane holds up his detonator, preparing to finish his plan. But Immortal grabs a hold of him, throwing him into space. When in doubt, throw them into space, he says with a smile. And then he looks down at his comms as the priority alert comes through. In moments, he's at the Guardians base in Utah, and the rest of the team have already arrived. They look up, wondering why Immortal called them, but Immortal shakes his head and the team is suddenly suspicious. The hell is going on? Darkwing growls. Suddenly, there's a blur of speed. Aquarius is cut in half. The Green Ghost is decapitated, and War Woman's neck is twisted around and snapped. Martian Man and Darkwing are both punched through the chest, sending their guts flying. The most powerful heroes on the planet all drop in a heartbeat. An Immortal looks around in shock. "You coward! Show yourself!" he says in the darkness. But there's a blur of motion behind him and he whirls. "You! I never liked you!" He hisses before his head is separated from his body and it rolls away into the darkness as the killer stands over his victims. "The feeling was mutual," Omni-Man whispers, blood dripping from his hands. A few nights later, Damian Darkblood, the demon detective, has arrived at the Grayson household. He stands outside with Nolan, discussing the investigation into the deaths of the Guardians of the Globe. "I can't seem to get over it. Who would do such a thing?" Nolan wonders. Damian nods. "That's what I intend to find out. But do you know about Black Samson?" Damian asks, and the two begin to discuss how Samson's suit has also gone missing from the tailors. "Do you think Samson is capable of something like this?" Darkblood asks, but Nolan doesn't think so. "If he did steal the suit himself, I can't imagine it would restore him to full power, let alone make him strong enough to do what you said happened here," Nolan says with a shake of his head. Meanwhile, Mark returns home from a night patrol to find Adam Eve waiting for him in his bedroom. She's crying, telling him what she saw the night that she went to the teen team's base. "It was Rex, with Kate, and there was more than one of them," she says through her tears. Mark tries to console her, pointing out that he never really liked Rex much anyway. But then they are interrupted as his mom opens the door. "Downstairs, both of you, now," she snaps. The two teen heroes head downstairs and sit in embarrassment on the couch as Deborah paces back and forth, lecturing them on being safe and not sneaking off together just because they have superpowers. "I'm so sorry," Mark whispers to Eve. Luckily, the embarrassment is cut short as Nolan comes through the door, sadness in his eyes. "Mark, we have a funeral to attend today. The Guardians of the Globe are all dead," breaking the news to his family. The next day, Mark and William are walking through the halls of their school, getting ready for class with their new physics teacher. Suddenly, a cute blonde girl walks past Mark, handing him a note. "Here, open it when you get home," she says with a smile. Both boys stare at the girl as she walks away, their mouths wide open in awe. "Did that just happen?" Mark whispers. They finally keep moving, with William asking if Mark wants to head to Burger Mart after school. "I can't. I've got a funeral to go to later." William turns in surprise. "No crap? The Guardians of the Globe thing, right? I guess you got invited because of your dad." "Keep it down, man! How many times do I have to tell you?" Mark snaps with a shake of his head, and the two friends head off to class. Later at the funeral, the heroes of the world gather to mourn the loss of the Guardians. Some were shocked that Black Samson would even show his face, but Darkblood points out that Samson has an alibi and couldn't have been the killer, nor did it look like he was the one who stole the suit from Art's shop. Omni-Man steps before the gathering of heroes, beginning to give his eulogy. But his speech is interrupted as the Guardians Memorial explodes behind him. Everyone looks up in shock as Black Samson's butler, wearing the supersuit that was stolen from Art, flies over their head. "No! They were mine! Mine!" Sanford screams in rage. Samson looks up in shock as the heroes begin to move to fight against the angry villain. "They can't be dead! Not until I've had my revenge! They will pay for what they did to Samson!" Sanford screams. But the rest of the heroes launch attacks at him. Fire weapons, energy blasts, sharp, pointy objects, all of them go flying at the insane butler. But the suit has given Sanford enhanced strength, and he begins to fight off the heroes. It's Omni-Man who moves at a blur of super speed, punching the butler lightly in the head, knocking him out, sending him falling to the ground. Black Samson runs over to Sanford and cradles his friend's hand. "What have you done, old friend?" Later that day, Adam Eve arrives at the headquarters of the teen team and finds Rex flirting with one of Kate's duplicates. She storms out of the base with Rex shouting after her. "Wait, it doesn't have to be this way," he says. Back at their home, Mark heads into his bedroom and opens the note from Amber, which has her number and several hearts written on the inside. Before he can dial the girl, though, there's a tap on his bedroom window. He finds it and sees William throwing rocks from the yard. "What's up?" Mark says as he floats down to the grass. William looks embarrassed, but he asks if Mark can do something for him now that he has superpowers. "I was thinking, if maybe," before finally just pointing up at the sky. Mark sighs, grabbing his friend, leaping upward, with William screaming with joy. Meanwhile, at the cemetery where the Guardians are buried, 2 grave robbers have begun to dig up the body of the immortal, believing the myth that if you drink from his skull, you'll also become immortal. Digging into the dirt, they finally strike his casket. "Pay dirt!" one shouts with joy, but they look up as the Mauler twins appear over them, both villains smiling. "We'll take it from here, boys. You have no idea how much time you just saved us."
And there you have it, volumes 1 and 2 of the Invincible comics. What did you guys think of this series? How do you think the comic compares to the TV show? Let us know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.